Have you ever been so desperate that you reached out to a complete stranger for help? Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible true story of Mia Thompson, a 24-year-old freelance graphic designer who found herself alone and in danger on the dark streets of Brooklyn. When her ride was canceled and a threatening stranger started following her, Mia did something that would change her life forever. She sent a location pin with a desperate plea for help to the most recent contact in her phone. What she didn't know was that the number belonged to Adriano Romano, a 39-year-old Italian-American businessman who controlled half of Brooklyn's underground operations. When Adrian saw that message, "Help me please," followed by a location pin from a scared young woman, he dropped everything and rushed to find her. What happened next involves modern technology, ancient chivalry, dangerous attraction, and a love story that proves sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Mia Thompson clutched her laptop bag tighter as she stepped out of the WeWork building in Dumbo, checking her phone for the third time in 2 minutes. It was 11:47 p.m., much later than she had planned to finish, but the rebranding project for the tech startup had required multiple revisions that had stretched well into the night. At 24, Mia had been working as a freelance graphic designer for 2 years, ever since graduating from Parsons with a degree in communication design and a mountain of student debt that made traditional employment feel less like a choice and more like a luxury she couldn't afford. Freelancing was unpredictable and stressful, but it allowed her to work with interesting clients and build a portfolio that was entirely her own. Tonight's client, Bright Future Analytics, had been demanding but well-paying, and Mia had pushed through her exhaustion to deliver the final logo concepts they needed for their investor presentation. The extra hours meant extra money, which meant she could actually make rent this month without having to choose between groceries and electricity. But now, standing alone on a street that had been busy during the day but was nearly deserted at midnight, Mia was beginning to regret her dedication to perfectionism. The Uber she had called 20 minutes ago had just been canceled by the driver, and the next available ride was 43 minutes away. Mia looked around the neighborhood, trying to assess her options. Dumbo was generally safe during the day, full of tech offices and trendy restaurants, but at this hour it felt different. Darker, more isolated, with too many shadows and not enough people. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another Uber cancellation. "Seriously?" Mia muttered, opening the app again to find that surge pricing had kicked in, and the cheapest available ride to her apartment in Park Slope was now $67. Money she didn't have for a ride she couldn't wait for. The subway was an option, but it meant a 10-minute walk through increasingly empty streets to reach the nearest station, then a transfer, and another walk on the other end. Under normal circumstances, Mia wouldn't have thought twice about it. She was a New Yorker, after all, and had been navigating the city independently since college. But as she started walking toward the subway, checking Google Maps on her phone, Mia became aware that someone was walking behind her at roughly the same pace. At first, she told herself it was just another late-night commuter heading in the same direction. Plenty of people worked late in this neighborhood, and there was no reason to assume that someone else walking toward the subway meant anything threatening. But when she turned left toward J Street, the footsteps behind her turned left as well. When she slowed down to check something on her phone, the footsteps slowed. When she sped up, they sped up. Mia's heart started beating faster as the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was being followed. She ducked into the doorway of a closed coffee shop and pulled out her phone, pretending to text while actually using the reflection in the dark window to see behind her. A man in his 30s, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap, was standing about 50 feet away, pretending to look at his own phone while clearly watching her. Mia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October night air. She was alone, in an increasingly deserted area, being followed by someone who was clearly waiting for her to move to an even more isolated location. Her mind raced through her options. She could go back to the WeWork building, but it was locked now, and her keycard access had expired at 11 p.m. She could try to find a bar or restaurant that was still open, but everything in the immediate area seemed to have closed for the night. She could call 911, but what would she tell them? That someone was walking in the same direction she was. That's when Mia remembered something her college roommate had told her about safety in dangerous situations. If you ever feel unsafe and you can't get help any other way, send your location to someone, anyone, and ask for help. Even if they can't come themselves, they might be able to call someone who can. Mia opened WhatsApp and scrolled to her recent contacts, looking for someone who might be awake and able to help. Her roommate was visiting family in California, 3 hours behind and probably asleep. Her parents were in Ohio and would panic if they got a message like this from their daughter. Her college friends were scattered across different time zones and different stages of life. Then she saw a contact she didn't immediately recognize. A. Romano, branding project. Mia stared at the name for a moment, trying to remember. Someone had contacted her about a potential project, she thought. They had texted back and forth briefly about scheduling a consultation, but they hadn't actually met yet. She couldn't even remember what kind of business it was, restaurant maybe, or some kind of import company. But the contact was recent, and whoever A. Romano was, they had reached out to her professionally, which suggested they were probably a legitimate business person, rather than some random stranger who might ignore her message or worse. More importantly, Mia was running out of time and options. The man who had been following her was starting to move closer, and she could see him checking his surroundings like someone preparing to make a move. With shaking fingers, Mia dropped a location pin in the chat with A. Romano and typed, "Help me please. Being followed by a man. Can't get ride. Scared." She hit send without allowing herself to think about how crazy it might seem to the person receiving it. Adriano Romano was in the middle of a heated discussion with his cousin Marco about territory disputes in Red Hook, when his personal phone, not the business line he used for meetings like this, but the number he gave to select clients and family members, buzzed with a WhatsApp notification. At 39, Adrian had learned to compartmentalize his attention during business meetings. The Romano family operations required constant vigilance and quick decision-making, but they also required the discipline to focus on the matter at hand, rather than being distracted by every phone call or message. But something about the urgency of the notification sound made him glance at his phone, and what he saw made everything else in the room fade to background noise. A location pin from someone named Mia Thompson, followed by a message that made his blood run cold. "Help me, please. Being followed by a man. Can't get ride. Scared." Adrian stared at the message for exactly 3 seconds, trying to place the name. Then he remembered. The graphic designer who had reached out about doing some work for one of his legitimate businesses. They had exchanged a few messages about scheduling a meeting to discuss rebranding for his restaurant chain. But they hadn't actually spoken yet. What mattered now wasn't who she was, but the fact that a young woman was in danger and had reached out to him for help. "Marco," Adrian said, standing abruptly and grabbing his jacket. "We'll continue this tomorrow." "What's wrong?" Marco asked, immediately alert. In their business, urgent interruptions usually meant serious problems. "Someone needs help. Handle the Red Hook situation however you think is best. I trust your judgment." Adrian was already heading for the door, pulling up the location pin on his phone. Dumbo, about 15 minutes away if he drove fast and ignored a few traffic laws. "Adrian, wait," Marco called. "Do you need backup?" "No, this is personal." Adrian's driver and bodyguard, a former Marine named Tony, who had been with the family for 8 years, was waiting outside the restaurant where they had been meeting. "Tony, we need to get to this location as fast as possible," Adrian said, showing him the phone. "A woman is in trouble." Tony looked at the address and nodded grimly. "I can get us there in 12 minutes. As they sped through the streets of Brooklyn, Adrian found himself thinking about the message he had received. The desperation in those few words. The courage it must have taken to reach out to a virtual stranger for help. The vulnerability of being young and female, and alone in a city that could be predatory to anyone who seemed like easy prey. Adrian had been raised by his Italian grandmother, a woman who had fled an abusive marriage in Naples and built a new life in Brooklyn through sheer force of will. Nonna Romano had taught him that a man's character was measured by how he treated people who were weaker than himself, and that any man who didn't protect women and children when they needed protection wasn't worthy of the name. The Romano family business operated in areas that law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't address, but it also operated according to strict codes about protecting innocent people. Adrian had built his reputation on being someone who kept his word, who honored his commitments, and who never allowed predators to operate in his territory. A young woman asking for help was exactly the kind of situation that demanded immediate action. Mia was trying to decide whether to run or find somewhere to hide when her phone buzzed with a response. "On my way. Stay where you are if it's safe. If not, find the nearest open business and wait inside. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Relief flooded through Mia so intensely that she felt dizzy. Someone was coming. Someone had taken her seriously and was actually coming to help her. She looked around and spotted a 24-hour convenience store about 2 blocks away, its neon sign glowing like a beacon in the darkness. The man who had been following her was still there, now pretending to look at something on a building directory but clearly watching her every move. Mia took a deep breath and started walking toward the store, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Behind her, she could hear footsteps following at the same steady pace. The convenience store was a relief. Bright fluorescent lights, security cameras, and a clerk who looked up when she entered with the kind of alert attention that suggested he was accustomed to late-night customers who might be seeking safety rather than snacks. "You okay, miss?" the clerk asked. He was probably in his 50s, with kind eyes and the sort of paternal concern that made Mia feel slightly less alone. "I think someone's been following me," Mia admitted. "I'm waiting for a friend to pick me up." The clerk nodded and gestured toward the security monitor behind the counter. "Guy in the baseball cap hanging around outside?" Mia looked at the screen and felt her stomach clench. The man who had been following her was standing across the street, still pretending to be occupied with his phone, but clearly watching the store entrance. "Yeah, that's him." "Don't worry, honey. Happens sometimes in this neighborhood. You just stay in here as long as you need to. I got cameras, I got an alarm button, and I got a baseball bat under this counter that I'm not afraid to use." The clerk's matter-of-fact protectiveness reminded Mia of her father, and she felt tears of gratitude prick her eyes. "Thank you so much." Her phone buzzed. "Which store are you in? I can see the location but want to make sure I find you quickly." Mia looked at the store name and texted back the address, along with a description of what she was wearing. Black jeans, dark green jacket, brown hair in a ponytail. 2 minutes away, came the immediate response. Mia found herself wondering what kind of person A. Romano was. The messages were direct and reassuring, suggesting someone who was comfortable taking charge in crisis situations. Probably a businessman, maybe someone older who had daughters of his own and understood the dangers young women faced in the city. She was imagining a middle-aged family man in a sensible sedan when a sleek black SUV pulled up directly in front of the store with the kind of confident precision that suggested the driver was exactly where he intended to be. Mia watched through the window as 2 men got out of the vehicle. The driver was large and alert, moving with the controlled awareness of someone trained in security or military work. But it was the passenger who made Mia's breath catch in her throat. He was tall, probably 6'1", with dark hair styled perfectly despite the late hour, olive skin that suggested Mediterranean heritage, and the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention. He wore an expensive-looking dark suit that fit his athletic frame like it had been custom-made, and when he moved toward the store entrance, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who was accustomed to handling difficult situations. But it was his eyes that made Mia feel suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that seemed to take in everything about her situation in a single glance. When those eyes met hers through the store window, Mia felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with relief and everything to do with attraction. This was not the middle-aged family man she had been expecting. The door chimed as he entered the store, and Mia became immediately aware of how he seemed to fill the space just by being in it. He moved with fluid grace, scanning the store quickly to assess the situation before focusing entirely on her. Mia Thompson? His voice was deep, with a slight Italian accent that made her name sound elegant and exotic. Yes, Mia managed, though her voice came out breathier than she intended. You're A. Romano? Adrian Romano, he replied, extending his hand. And you're safe now. When Mia shook his hand, the contact sent warmth shooting up her arm. His skin was warm and slightly rough, suggesting he did more than just office work, and his grip was firm without being aggressive. Thank you for coming, Mia said, realizing she was still holding his hand and reluctantly releasing it. I know this must seem crazy, texting a stranger like that. Adrian's expression softened. Not crazy, smart. You recognized danger and found a way to get help. That takes courage. The way he said courage, with genuine respect and admiration, made Mia feel like she had done something impressive rather than just panicked and reached out desperately. Is he still out there? Adrian asked, moving to look out the store window. Mia joined him, standing close enough to catch a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her acutely aware of him as a man rather than just a rescuer. The man who had been following her was still across the street, but his body language had changed. Instead of the predatory confidence he had displayed earlier, he now looked uncertain, possibly intimidated by the arrival of the SUV and the two men who had emerged from it. That's him, Mia said, the one in the baseball cap. Adrian studied the man for a moment, his jaw tightening with what looked like controlled anger. Then he pulled out his phone and made a brief call, speaking in rapid Italian to someone on the other end. Tony's going to have a conversation with our friend across the street, Adrian said after hanging up. Make sure he understands that this neighborhood isn't a good place for him to spend time. As they watched, the large man who had been driving the SUV, Tony, apparently, crossed the street and approached Mia's stalker. The conversation was brief, with Tony doing most of the talking and the other man doing a lot of nervous nodding. Within minutes, the stalker was walking quickly away in the opposite direction. What did he say to him? Mia asked, fascinated despite herself. Probably just explained that there are consequences for threatening women in this area, Adrian replied with a slight smile. Tony can be very persuasive when he needs to be. Something about the way Adrian said consequences sent a little shiver through Mia. Not fear exactly, but an awareness that she was dealing with someone who operated in a world where problems were solved more directly than anything she was accustomed to. Come on, Adrian said, placing his hand gently on the small of her back. Let me get you home safely. The contact sent heat radiating through Mia's entire body. His hand was large and warm, and even through her jacket, she could feel the strength in his fingers. It was a protective gesture, but it also felt intimate in a way that made her hyper-aware of him as they walked toward his SUV. This is very kind of you, Mia said, as Adrian opened the passenger door for her. I really can't thank you enough. You don't need to thank me, Adrian replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I'm just glad you reached out when you needed help. The interior of Adrian's SUV was luxurious, but understated. Leather seats, dark wood trim, and technology that suggested serious money without being flashy about it. But what struck Mia most was how safe she felt, surrounded by obvious wealth and protection, after spending the evening feeling vulnerable and alone. Where are we heading? Adrian asked as Tony got into the driver's seat. Mia gave him her address in Park Slope, then settled back into the incredibly comfortable passenger seat, finally allowing herself to truly relax for the first time in hours. So, Adrian said as they drove through the Brooklyn streets, tell me about this project you were working on so late. Must have been something important to keep you out past midnight. Rebranding for a tech startup, Mia replied, grateful for a normal conversation after the stress of the evening. They're launching next month and decided they hated their logo at the last minute. And they called you to fix it. That's what I do. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I fix other people's visual identity crises at all hours of the day and night. Adrian smiled, and the expression transformed his face from intimidating to devastatingly attractive. Sounds like you're good at solving problems under pressure. I try to be. Though tonight was a different kind of problem solving than I'm used to. How so? Mia thought about how to explain the terror of realizing she was being stalked, the desperation of reaching out to a stranger, the relief of discovering that her instinct to trust him had been right. I've never had to ask a complete stranger for help before, she said finally. I'm usually pretty independent, pretty good at handling things on my own. But tonight you recognized a situation you couldn't handle alone, and you were smart enough to reach out before it got worse, Adrian finished. That's not weakness, Mia. That's intelligence. The way he said her name, with that slight Italian inflection, sent warmth spreading through her chest. Can I ask you something? Mia said. Of course. What kind of business are you in? I remember you mentioning something about restaurants when you first contacted me, but... She gestured around the obviously expensive SUV. This seems like more than just restaurants. Adrian was quiet for a moment, and Mia could see him choosing his words carefully. My family has been in New York for 3 generations. We own several restaurants, some construction companies, real estate development projects. Our interests have diversified over time. It was a diplomatic answer that didn't really answer the question, but Mia sensed that pressing for more details might not be appropriate for someone who had just rescued her from a dangerous situation. And what kind of rebranding were you thinking about? She asked instead. Something that reflects tradition, but also appeals to modern customers. Classic Italian food and hospitality, but presented in a way that attracts young professionals, families, people who appreciate quality, but also want contemporary atmosphere. As Adrian described his vision for updating his restaurant's image, Mia found herself genuinely intrigued by the creative challenge. But more than that, she was struck by how thoughtfully he spoke about balancing respect for tradition with the need to evolve and grow. It sounds like you really care about honoring your family's legacy while also building something new, Mia observed. Exactly. That's why I reached out to you. I looked at your portfolio online, and I could see that you understand how to modernize classic concepts without losing their essential character. The professional compliment, delivered with obvious sincerity, made Mia feel proud of her work in a way that was both gratifying and slightly intoxicating. I'd love to work on something like that, she said. When did you want to schedule a proper consultation? How about tomorrow evening? Adrian suggested. I could show you the restaurants, let you get a feel for what we're working with. Maybe over dinner, so you can experience the food and atmosphere as a customer would. The invitation was clearly business, but something in Adrian's tone suggested it might also be personal. Mia felt her pulse quicken at the thought of spending an evening with him in a more relaxed setting. That sounds perfect, she said. As they pulled up outside Mia's apartment building, a converted brownstone that looked modest next to the luxury she was currently riding in, Mia felt reluctant for the evening to end, which was crazy, considering that 2 hours ago she had been terrified and desperate. But Adrian had transformed a nightmare into something that felt almost like an adventure, and his presence had made her feel safer and more valued than she had felt in months of struggling to build her freelance career. Thank you, she said, as Adrian walked her to the building's entrance. For everything. For coming when I called. For getting me home safely, for... She paused, trying to find words for the way he had made her feel like someone worth protecting. For what? Adrian prompted gently. For treating me like someone who mattered, even though you barely knew me. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that Mia could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Mia, he said softly, you reached out to me when you needed help, and you trusted me to come through for you. That makes you important to me. The intensity in his voice when he said important to me made Mia's breath catch. They were standing very close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look up at him. close enough that she could see her own reflection in his eyes. For a moment, that seemed to stretch forever, they looked at each other in silence. Mia could feel the electric tension building between them, could see something in Adrian's expression that suggested he was having thoughts that went well beyond professional courtesy. Then Adrian stepped back, though she could see the effort it cost him. "Get some rest," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "I'll text you tomorrow about dinner." After he left, Mia stood in her small apartment, still feeling the warmth of his presence, still processing everything that had happened. She had started the evening as a struggling freelancer working late on a difficult project, and ended it being rescued by the most attractive man she had ever met, who also happened to be a potential client who wanted to take her to dinner. The next morning, Mia woke up wondering if the entire experience had been some kind of stress-induced dream. But when she checked her phone, there was a text from Adrian. "Good morning, beautiful. I hope you slept well. Looking forward to showing you the restaurants tonight. 7 p.m.? The casual use of beautiful sent butterflies dancing through Mia's stomach, especially combined with the obvious thoughtfulness of checking in on her well-being. "Good morning," she texted back. "Yes, 7 p.m. sounds perfect. Thank you again for last night." "Thank you for trusting me to help," came the immediate reply. "See you tonight." Mia spent the day trying to focus on work, but found her thoughts constantly drifting to Adrian. She researched Romano restaurants online and discovered that they were well-reviewed, upscale establishments known for authentic Italian cuisine and elegant atmosphere. The kind of places where she would normally feel intimidated by the prices and sophistication. She also found herself thinking about the way Adrian had handled the situation the night before, the immediate response to her desperate message, the calm competence with which he had assessed the threat, the gentleness he had shown toward her combined with the obvious authority he commanded from people like Tony. Most of all, she kept thinking about the moment outside her apartment, when he had looked at her like she was something precious he wanted to protect and cherish. At 7 p.m. exactly, Adrian picked Mia up in a different car, a sleek black sedan that was elegant but less conspicuous than the SUV. He looked incredible in a dark blue suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and athletic build, and when he smiled at her, Mia felt that same electric attraction that had caught her off guard the night before. "You look beautiful," he said, as he held the car door for her, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. Mia had agonized over what to wear for a business dinner that felt like it might also be a date, finally settling on a black dress that was professional but flattering, paired with heels that made her feel confident rather than uncomfortable. "Thank you," she replied, trying to ignore the way his compliment made her feel warm all over. Adrian took her to 3 different Romano restaurants, each with its own character and clientele, but all sharing the same commitment to quality food, excellent service, and atmosphere that managed to be both sophisticated and welcoming. "This is incredible," Mia said as they finished dinner at the 3rd location, a cozy place in Brooklyn Heights that specialized in seafood and had a view of the Manhattan skyline that took her breath away. "I can see why you want to modernize the branding without losing the essence. Each place has such a distinct personality." "That's exactly what I was hoping you would understand," Adrian said, leaning back in his chair with obvious satisfaction. "Too many rebranding efforts try to make everything look the same, but we want to celebrate what makes each location special, while still creating a cohesive family identity." As the evening progressed, their conversation had moved naturally from business to personal topics. Mia learned that Adrian had taken over the family businesses from his father 5 years earlier, that he had a degree from NYU, but had learned most of what he knew about running restaurants from working in them since he was a teenager, and that he was passionate about preserving Italian culinary traditions while also adapting them for American tastes. "What about you?" Adrian asked as they shared dessert, a tiramisu that was possibly the best thing Mia had ever tasted. "How did you end up as a freelance designer?" Mia told him about growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, about discovering graphic design in college and falling in love with the way visual elements could tell stories and create emotional connections, about the challenge of building a career in a competitive field while also trying to maintain creative integrity. It's scary sometimes, she admitted. Never knowing where the next project is coming from, constantly having to prove myself to new clients, dealing with people who think design work should be cheap because it's just computer stuff. But you love it. I do. When I create something that perfectly captures what a client is trying to communicate, when I see how good design can make a business more successful or help people connect with something they care about, it feels like I'm doing something meaningful. Adrian nodded with obvious understanding. That's exactly how I feel about the restaurants. When I see families making memories over meals we've prepared, when I see young couples having their first dates in spaces we've created, when I see our staff building careers and supporting their own families, it makes all the stress and long hours worthwhile. The passion in his voice when he talked about his work made him even more attractive to Mia. This wasn't just someone who owned businesses for profit. This was someone who genuinely cared about the impact his work had on other people's lives. "Can I ask you something that might be too personal?" Mia said, as they prepared to leave the restaurant. "You can ask me anything." "Last night, when you got my message, why did you drop everything to come help me? I mean, you barely knew me, and it could have been anything from a genuine emergency to someone playing a prank." Adrian was quiet for a moment as he helped her with her coat, his hands briefly touching her shoulders in a way that sent electricity through her entire body. "Because," he said finally, "I was raised to believe that when someone asks for help, especially a woman who's afraid and alone, you don't ask questions or calculate risks. You just help. Even if it's inconvenient?" "Mia," Adrian said, turning her to face him, "nothing about helping you has been inconvenient. Everything about knowing you has been unexpected and wonderful." The way he said, "unexpected and wonderful," while looking directly into her eyes, made Mia's heart race. They were standing very close again, just as they had the night before. But this time the attraction between them felt even more electric. "Adrian," Mia said softly, not sure what she wanted to say, but knowing she needed to say something. Instead of words, Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing gentle patterns on her cheekbones that sent shivers through her entire body. "I know this is moving fast," he said, his voice rough with desire. "I know you have every reason to be cautious about getting involved with someone you just met. But Mia, what I feel for you, it's not something I can ignore. What do you feel for me? Like you're someone I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. Like protecting you and cherishing you and making you happy are the most important things I could ever do." The intensity of his words should have been overwhelming, but instead, they made Mia feel desired in a way she had never experienced before. "I feel something too," she admitted. "Something that scares me and excites me at the same time." "What scares you?" Mia thought about how to articulate the complexity of what she was feeling. Attraction to someone whose world she didn't fully understand. Gratitude that might be confused with love. The feeling that she was stepping into something much bigger and more intense than anything she had experienced before. "I'm afraid that I'm falling for you too fast. That I don't really know who you are. That I'm confusing gratitude with something deeper." Adrian's thumbs continued their gentle caresses on her face. "And what excites you? The way you make me feel safe and valued and alive. The way you look at me like I'm something precious. The way I feel like I can trust you completely, even though I barely know you." "Then trust this," Adrian said, leaning closer. "What's happening between us is real. It's not gratitude or convenience or confusion. It's two people who found each other at exactly the right moment." When Adrian kissed her, it was with a passion that had been building since the moment they met. His lips were warm and firm, his hands tangled in her hair, and Mia felt like every nerve ending in her body was suddenly alive with electricity. She kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring all of her gratitude and growing love and desire into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mia felt like her entire world had shifted. "Wow," she whispered. "Wow," Adrian agreed, resting his forehead against hers. 3 months later, Mia was working from a beautiful office in the Romano family's business headquarters in Manhattan, leading the rebranding project for all their restaurants while also taking on select freelance clients who aligned with her increasingly sophisticated portfolio. The rebranding had been incredibly successful, helping the Romano restaurants attract new customers while maintaining the loyalty of longtime patrons. But more than that, working closely with Adrian had shown Mia what it meant to have a partner who valued her expertise, supported her creative vision, and created opportunities for her to grow professionally. She had also learned more about the complexity of Adrian's business interests. The Romano family's success had been built over 3 generations and involved activities that weren't always strictly legal, though Adrian had been careful to shield her from anything that might compromise her own ethical standards. "I need you to understand something about my world," Adrian had told her one evening about 6 weeks into their relationship, as they sat in his apartment overlooking the city. "What's that?" "Sometimes the right thing to do and the legal thing to do aren't the same thing. Sometimes protecting people you care about requires methods that your business school textbooks wouldn't approve of." Mia had considered this carefully. "Are you telling me you're involved in illegal activities?" "I'm telling you that I operate in a world where protecting my family, my employees, and my community sometimes requires relationships and decisions that exist in gray areas." It wasn't exactly a confession, but it was an acknowledgement that Adrian's influence extended beyond legitimate business operations. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I respect you too much to let you discover these complications by accident. Because I want you to make informed choices about being part of my life. And because I'm in love with you. And I want you to love me with full knowledge of who I am." The conversation had led to serious consideration on Mia's part. She had always preferred clear rules and straightforward solutions, and Adrian's world was neither clear nor straightforward. But she had also seen the results of his influence, the way he protected his employees and their families, the way he contributed to community causes, the way he treated everyone from his business associates to restaurant staff with genuine respect. Most importantly, she had seen how he treated her, not as someone to be controlled or protected from reality, but as an equal partner whose opinions and concerns mattered in every decision that affected their relationship. "I'm not looking for someone who lives entirely within conventional boundaries," Mia had told him finally. "I'm looking for someone who uses their power and influence to protect people rather than exploit them. From what I can see, that describes you perfectly." Their relationship had deepened rapidly after that conversation. Adrian had introduced her to his extended family, cousins and business associates who treated her with immediate respect and affection. Mia had met Adrian's Aunt Rosa, who ran the family's charitable foundation, and who had become something of a mentor to Mia as she learned to navigate the Romano family's complex social dynamics. She had also learned that Adrian's protective instincts extended far beyond their personal relationship. He was someone who took responsibility for the well-being of everyone in his orbit, who solved problems that law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't address, who ensured that predators and exploiters couldn't operate in his territory. "You know," Mia said one evening as they stood on the balcony of Adrian's penthouse apartment, looking out over Brooklyn and Manhattan, "6 months ago, I was struggling to pay rent and working alone in my tiny apartment, wondering if I'd ever build a sustainable career. And now?" Adrian asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Now I'm working on projects I love, with resources I never imagined having, supported by someone who believes in me more than I sometimes believe in myself." Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You were always capable of this level of success, Amore. You just needed the right opportunities, and someone who recognized your potential." Mia leaned back against his chest, feeling the security and contentment that had become the foundation of her daily life. Any regrets about answering that desperate text from a stranger? Adrian turned her in his arms, his dark eyes holding hers with the same intensity that had taken her breath away the night they met. My only regret is that you had to be scared and alone before you reached out to me. If I could change anything about our story, it would be that I found you before you needed rescuing. But then, we might never have found each other at all. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. In that case, Adrian said, pulling her closer, I'm grateful for every circumstance that led you to send that message. As they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city where they had found each other, Mia thought about how one moment of desperation had become the doorway to everything she had ever wanted. She had reached out to a stranger in her darkest hour and discovered not just safety, but love, partnership, and a future more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. Sometimes, she reflected, help comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people we think are strangers turn out to be exactly who we need, and sometimes the most frightening nights lead to the most beautiful mornings. That's the story of Mia Thompson, the freelance designer who sent a desperate location pin to a number she barely recognized, and Adriano Romano, the businessman who dropped everything to rescue a woman he had never met. Their story proves that heroism can come through a phone screen, that modern technology can facilitate ancient chivalry, and that sometimes the most important messages we send are the ones we never planned to write. Mia and Adrian's love story reminds us that courage sometimes means reaching out when we need help, that the right person will always answer when we call, and that the most meaningful relationships often begin with simple words. Help me. If this incredible story touched your heart, and you want to hear more amazing tales of unexpected rescue, modern romance, and love that conquers all obstacles, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that help can come from anywhere, and that sometimes a single text message can change 2 lives forever. What did you think of Mia and Adrian's story? Have you ever reached out to a stranger for help? Would you have sent that desperate message? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected kindness, modern heroism, and finding love in the most unlikely circumstances. Remember, sometimes when you're brave enough to ask for help, the universe sends you exactly who you need. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.